I'm trying to set this up. All right, I think we are live. Hey everyone, it's Nick, COO at Celestia Labs. Really excited to be on today with Terry, who is head of strategy at Eclipse. As some of you may know, Eclipse launched their mainnet for builders about a week and a half ago. And so we wanted to have Terry on to discuss the launch, get some updates on what has been cooking in the Eclipse ecosystem since then. So anyway, Terry, welcome. Tell us, a bit about yourself, and then let's dive in.
Yeah, thanks for having me. And shout out to the Celestia community. Shout out to the Sloss in particular. Thanks for all the support. Yeah, we definitely notice you. So
the Sloss are definitely tuning in here. So good to give them a shout out.
100%. I'm gonna go check out the tweet, and it's gonna be like all the slots have liked the tweet. And every time I see that, I'm just like, wow, what a community. Quick introduction on myself. My name is Terry. I'm currently head of strategy at Eclipse. Before Eclipse, I used to be a venture investor at a fund called 1KX for about 2.5 years. I got into crypto through an interesting path, a little different from most people you talk to. I was a gamer. I played Axie Infinity, specifically Axie Classic, back in, I'd say, early 2020, late 2020. And then I started writing about kind of what I thought was novel about the crypto gaming ecosystem and the NFT ecosystem. And in that process, some people found my writing interesting and they wanted me to come work for them. And that's kind of how I got into venture research and venture investing. There at 1KX, I was doing infrastructure research, scalability, ZK. And then kind of noticed that, right, like there were now these past bottlenecks that were holding back blockchain design were getting quickly solved, right? For example, specifically data availability. Celestia was coming out with high throughput, securely like consumer hardware verifiable data availability layer. And so, our thought was, okay, everywhere else is currently and in the future going to get bottlenecked by execution, which we largely saw play out. Why don't we go build something that's innovating on the execution layer? And so I ended up joining Eclipse.
Awesome, great intro. And I got to know you, or we finally got to meet in person at Modular Summit, and I was really impressed with your presentation. I feel like, as your title implies, like head of strategy, you have a very strategic mind, and you're thinking really deeply about how the modular stack is going to evolve going into the future. So anyway, let's dive into the primary content of this live stream, which is the mainnet launch, right? So a week and a half ago, you guys made this announcement that you guys launched or open to builders, right? And I'm just curious to hear, what's happened since launch. Are there any metrics you can share? What's happening on mainnet now that you guys are live, not yet for users? And like, is there anything that surprised you?
Yeah. So right now we've had, in terms of metrics, like 1,500 unique addresses, which likely means like 10 people interact with the bridge. Even though we've explicitly told users not to bridge. So
it's only open. You can only access it via CLI, right? I saw that in the announcement.
Multiple people
some real degens bridging funds over, huh?
They're reading the documentation. They're running the CLI. They're trying to bridge over. We've had 2 third-party bridge front ends launch, even though we explicitly were like, okay, yeah, we don't want a front end at the moment. Kudos to them. One has also launched an NFT collection, which
wow,
we've been minting and playing around with. We've gotten a ton of inbound from interested parties that are deploying. I believe today is the day that Mango is deploying as well, or tomorrow. And then by end of next week or early next week, you should expect to see Orca there as well. Maybe some delays, but I think in the next 2 weeks, we'll see you can expect to see all the dApps that you love and interact with on Solana on a daily basis, also on Eclipse. But we also have a ton of Eclipse native dApps that are launching, sometime between the next 2 weeks. So expect a lot of activity there.
Very cool. Yeah, it's always surprising, after you go live, you really don't know what's going to happen. After Celestia went live, we had people just like posting memes into the blob space, so it's just, I don't know, it's really fun because blockchains are open systems, and they're permissionless. Like people can just jump in and do whatever. Like you can say, hey, don't use the bridge, but some degen out there is gonna do it, and there's nothing you can do about it. And I actually love that aspect of this space. I also know that you guys launched a hackathon recently, right? Or like I think it's ongoing currently. Is that true?
Yeah, ongoing. $50,000 in prizes. And also, I think the best thing about the hackathon is we've curated a panel of fantastic judges, mostly people who understand the technology, but also who understand the market, can provide feedback in both, give you access to a lot of capital, give you access to, network in the space. So I think it's definitely an interesting opportunity if you're interested in building in the space in general, not just on Eclipse.
Very cool. Yeah, and to the builders out there, I think this is a very unique opportunity to be at the tip of the spear, not just for the modular ecosystem, but also to me, what Eclipse represents is this freeing of the Solana virtual machine from just its monolithic origins on the Solana L1, and similar to the trajectory that the EVM had. I think the SVM sort of like community is going to go through a similar evolution that's being kickstarted with what Eclipse is doing. So I think there's just a massive opportunity for growth getting involved at this point in time. So one of the things that you said, I want to kind of dig into the significance of Eclipse's launch for the broader modular ecosystem, right? And also, I mean, one of the things that you said in the tweet that I loved was you said that Eclipse is only possible because of Celestia, right? And so I'm wondering, like, what makes you say that? So let's kind of unpack those two questions.
So I'll start with the second one because I've been thinking about this a lot as well. I think when I was at 1KX, I talked to this very seasoned game developer who's been around the space for 30, 40 years. And he told me this interesting idea, which was that in order for John Carmack to get Quake and Doom working on back then what was a consumer desktop, like he needed to even write an algorithm to make like doing the square root of a number fast, because that was used in like vector normalization and graphics. And so that is like an extremely, extremely low level mathematical primitive. But even that he needed to optimize, because otherwise there was no way that a game and some sort of like graphics would run on a consumer PC. And then the developer told me today, they don't even care. Like these game developers are like, okay, no, we're just going to put like mountains over here and we're going to render like multiple kilometers that way. And we just that the GPU is just going to take care of it, right? There was a time when application developers and specifically like infrastructure developers as well that were building on underlying layers, they were severely constricted by the capacity of the underlying layer. And you had to spend an incredible amount of time, an incredible amount of talent, an incredible amount of money actually optimizing your stack because of limitations on other stacks that you relied on, right? As these stacks free up, as you get GPUs and gaming computers that have, and then graphics accelerated with these GPUs, then you get access to way more things that you can do that are interesting in your stack. And then that enables more innovation on people on the next stack and then on the next stack, right? So what Celestia enabled us to do with high throughput DA is we didn't have to spend all this time kind of like optimizing, okay, here's what we should take out of the call data. We should use an index instead of an account. And that's going to save us, 32 bytes off the address space. And that's going to give us like a 20% marginal less gas. We're like, okay, we don't have to do any of that. We can take the Solana block, dump it in Celestia, and don't have to worry about it because it's high performant. It's still consumer hardware verifiable. And we can then move on to do what we think is best, which is focused on building a trustless L2, focused on execution and selling execution space, right? And so that's kind of like why I think like this is a different paradigm now, right? Like we're in a place where you have no restrictions on DA, so you can do interesting things on the execution stack. Before you had restrictions here, but now it's time to innovate on the execution stack, and that's unleashed because of DA. So that's the response to the second part. The first part, it's a significant day, I think, for Ethereum, because largely what we've seen, and there have been examples of like alt VMs that settle to Ethereum and use Ethereum DA. I think Fuel and Starknet are the two ones that I can think of off the top of my head. But the expansion of what is expressible that settles to Ethereum is becoming wider and wider. And I think now we're at a time of a little bit of disillusionment in the Ethereum vision as a global settlement layer. But this just proves, right? Like we're not settling to other layers. We're settling to Ethereum because it has the most amount of users, the most amount of liquidity, the newest set of builders, the most interesting activity. A lot today still happens on Ethereum. And to gain access to that, and to gain access to all the liquidity, all the assets on Ethereum L1, that is a very significant value proposition today. And therefore, I think continuously we're going to see a lot of people building new, interesting modular stacks that continue to settle to Ethereum. right? And there's still a network effect there. And so kind of bringing what Ethereum, I think a lot of people in the Ethereum community see as the biggest threat to Ethereum onto Ethereum. I think it's kind of a interesting milestone for Ethereum today.
Yeah. On the first point about the abundance of DA, right? Obviously, this is something that Celestia has been trying to explain and put forward. Is releasing the like we've been building with so many constraints, right? And that fundamentally like sort of waterfalls down or I guess up the stack. Like when you don't have an abundance of block space, then the kind of design decisions and trade-offs you make at the execution layer and the application layer, et cetera, are all completely different. And so and it's funny because there's a lot of people on Twitter who were saying like, oh well, yeah, Eclipse is consuming a lot of block space, but that's because they're just wasting it. They're just like posting the raw blocks and being super inefficient and whatever, as if that's like a bad thing. And I'm like, no, that's a good thing. That's a healthy sign. That means that like what we're doing is working, because now they like, rather than having this, I don't know, maybe it would have taken you guys a few more months to like, actually optimize the Eclipse stack so that like, okay, we're going to consume like, 50% less block space. And that way it's going to be this much cheaper for the end user. Instead, it's just like, you know what, like we don't need to waste that engineering manpower. We can just go straight to market with the product as it is, because like that's not going to affect our bottom line. And so, yeah, I'm really excited for to see that sort of like the new market structure to play out and unleash all this like creativity, and just like stop having all these developers waste time on gas golfing. Like that's like, I don't know, like think of all the man hours that have been wasted, like smart contract engineers, like making writing a new way to multiply numbers together to make their decks more efficient or something like that. Right. And I just hope we can like get beyond that so that we can start building again, focusing on the end product and the user experience and those kind of things. Like people just think that like the infrastructure has no impact, or like there's too much infrastructure. But yeah, anyway, I digress. I don't know if you have anything else you want to expand on that point, but just want to drive that home for people.
No, I totally agree. Right, like yeah, the totally said it best. Like the amount of engineering hours and effort and additional time until we could go to market that this would take, to save us, I don't know, 20, 30%, 40% of additional data availability, just like in terms of bytes, which would not entirely at all translate to anything significant from the end user perspective that is using the application or the execution layer. It does not make any sense when we have that time and we could, take that talent and work on things that would actually matter to the end user.
Yeah. And then now to go back to sort of the significance of Eclipse for the modular ecosystem and for Ethereum. You said it well that it's interesting. Like Solana and Ethereum are often perceived as like competitors, right? And what's so interesting about Eclipse is it's sort of like this bridge in a sense of like enabling the Solana ecosystem to actually be connected to Ethereum in a meaningful way and settle there. And like now all these applications that grew up in the Solana ecosystem, it sounds like they're going to deploy an instance of their application on you. And so it's kind of bridging these, like those are the two major developer ecosystems, are the two major ecosystems of users and liquidity. And I see Eclipse as sort of like this merging and kind of like I remember David Hoffman like tweeting out this image of Eclipse as like this smorgasbord of like Solana, Ethereum, Celestia, risk zero for proving and things like that. And it's cool how you can take the best of each component here, right? Like Ethereum to me actually is still very much the king in terms of settlement, distribution, and Solana I think has the best sort of execution model. Celestia obviously has best in class data availability, and then and like you're able to take the best of each layer to build this like higher level ecosystem that kind of unifies all of it. So that's the way that at least that I see Eclipse.
I absolutely agree. Right, like if the whole point of the modular stack is it gives you choice, then once you have a choice, why not just choose the best one at each layer, right? Ethereum is like an obvious choice for the settlement layer because simply even like just taking into account its liquidity profile and the amount of assets that lie on Ethereum, that in and of itself is a sufficient choice to choose Ethereum as a settlement layer. Celestia, I don't think at that time when we were building, there was simply just no other choice, right? And I still don't think today that there is a maturity in the level of available tooling that allows you to build a fully permissionless L2 in any other ecosystem, any other DA layer, right? Like Blobstream, you guys have Blobstream X, you guys have multiple vendors for Blobstream X, like clients everywhere, high throughput DA. I don't think that is available, to my knowledge, at any other DA layer today. And then obviously, like if you go take a look at which chain is doing the highest throughput, and which chain kind of is optimized for throughput, then the answer is obvious in terms of production. What's in production today, right?
Yep. So one of the things that I want to talk a little bit more about is like, Eclipse has quickly raced up the leaderboard on as far as like the live rollups on the Celestia mainnet to be like the number 3 consumer of data blobs of all time in just a week and a half, which has been astonishing. Actually, a little bit intimidating, because now it feels like, okay, wow, I used to feel like, okay, Celestia's block space has a lot of there's such an abundance of it, like we don't have to necessarily worry about it being filled up, but like it's starting to become really real that like, okay, we need to, the block space is going to get filled up, right? Like once you guys launch for with open to users and your actual blocks are filled, like that's going to only just increase the amount of demand. And we have a very robust scaling roadmap. So I'm not necessarily concerned, but I'm just like, I'm curious, like what do you foresee? First of all, like what is it actually in the blocks right now? Because it's not user transactions, it's just voting and like, I don't know, explain that, because that's been a topic on Twitter that I've seen people like dig into a little bit. And then like, what do you foresee for once you guys are actually live for users? Like where will demand go from here?
Yeah. So what's in the blocks, right? It's an entire Solana block. Like imagine an entire Ethereum block. What's in it? It's the block hash, it's the timestamp, it's the epoch, it's the aggregated BLS signature, and then there's like the receipt tree, the state tree, and the transaction root. So there's a lot of stuff in there, right? Versus like if you just put transaction data in there in a compressed way, that is way less stuff. Or like state tree in there in a compressed way, that's way less stuff. And so that's where kind of the overhead is coming from, because we have the Solana block. There's a block cache. It has the timestamp, the epoch, the current leader, the previous block cache, et cetera, et cetera. That makes it
how frequently are you guys posting that?
I think posting, it's batched. So I believe
batched, okay.
something like in the order of a couple of seconds. So it is batched and it is compressed, right? So
I
people
see,
say,
okay.
oh, like it's hyper unoptimized. Well, no, it's hyper unoptimized as in like we didn't really care to like optimize what exactly we're putting on there, but it is optimized in that we batch it, we compress it, and we make sure like at least what's on, like if we were unideological about what's on there, like we at least minimize our footprint. But the reason why we did that is like it's incredibly trivial for us to replay. That's what our engineers have been telling us, right? Like versus we could create a new scheme where we serialize transactions a certain way and then we have to recover them in Blobstream for our withdrawal function, whatever. If we just do this, it's super simple. It works out of the gate. We can go to market faster, right? But without sacrificing on any trust assumptions. And at the moment, there is no like cost relayed back to the user.
So just to like put a bow on that, so like you guys are, what is like the block time at Eclipse? Like, is it like 1 second, or like, so you have a bunch of these like Eclipse blocks, and then you batch and compress them and then post them as a blob on Celestia, basically. But there's like multiple, like I guess how many blocks are happening like per unit time?
It's every 400 milliseconds. So right now we're mainnet equivalent to Solana. That is going to change in the next coming months as we
change,
explore performance.
meaning go faster.
That would be ideal. So we're looking into
Yeah.
what it takes for us to go faster, produce bigger blocks, have higher CU limits than mainnet, and what might it look like to put, say like a high performance client of the Solana VM as an L2, like once that's more stable and released. And of course, like if when that happens, we will be looking for you guys to also expand your throughput and but as you said, like we've looked at the Celestia scaling roadmap, and we have high confidence that it's going to scale to the needs that we will produce. So, for example, like if you look at the maximum size possible of a Solana transaction, and then you look at the block time, and then you kind of extrapolate like at maximum throughput what this might look like in terms of DA. Like Celestia at its end game is plenty suitable to be able to support this with adequate compression and a tiny bit of optimization on our side. So we have high confidence that Celestia will be able to support all of Eclipse's DA needs. But once users are on, like it's gonna a lot more data is gonna come on.
All right, I'm excited and also intimidated, as I said. But something that I love that you mentioned, and this is something I've been trying to say, is like you can actually do more interesting things at the execution layer and go faster, go bigger when you don't have to run a full consensus layer, right? I know that we want to have decentralized sequencing and things like that, but you don't need 1,000 nodes to get the censorship resistance and liveness guarantees that you need from your execution layer. And so to me, it's going to be really exciting to see something like Eclipse push performance of execution far beyond what you can do with Solana, right? And so I'm going to be very excited to see that actually take place. And then another thing that I think is worth mentioning just on this point is that Anatoly jokes a lot about like, oh, well, Solana could be an Ethereum rollup. You just have to post all of the Solana block data to Ethereum, right? And he says that because it's so clearly not possible to do that. Like it's like a joke. It's like, okay, good luck trying to post all the Solana data to Ethereum. Ethereum's DA bandwidth is just not even close to where it needs to be to make that possible. But the interesting thing is that Celestia wants to actually enable that. Like in the future, I hope that Celestia's DA bandwidth is actually possible. It's actually possible for Solana, if they wanted to be a Celestia rollup, for example, like to scale to that level. And again, where Eclipse like falls into this is like it was even right now I would imagine given your guys' data consumption, even post 444, it's just not feasible to want to run a network like you guys want to run on something like Ethereum, like the scaling, like it wasn't really possible to build these high performance, super data hungry execution layers on the existing infrastructure. So like, yeah, I think Celestia is making that possible, and hopefully there's going to be like multiple Solana's scale execution layers on Celestia in the future. So I don't know. It's just a really exciting time where the realm of what's possible has just been really blown open, and I don't think people have really like caught up to that idea. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, 100%. So let me address the second point first, and then go to scaling execution versus and outsourcing consensus and data availability. We did the math. I think right now, if my memory is correct, like Dank's sharding target DA rate is like 1.3 megabytes per second. And then the current like maximum size for a Solana transaction is like 1,232 bytes. So we did the math with 4844 and with Dank's sharding target rates that are known. And we were like, okay, yeah, actually Ethereum DA cannot support the level of transaction throughput that Solana has today on Ethereum. And so if we want to further optimize the execution layer, like there's no chance that we can use Ethereum DA. We have to use something else. Yeah, and so that's kind of like how we ended up at Celestia, and at the time's obvious choice, it still is. In terms of the first part of outsourcing like data availability and consensus, it's kind of like the modular stack is about having some people who are best at one thing work on that thing, and you work on what you're good at, right? And that worked beautifully across all of the industrial age, where people specialize in certain things that they're fantastic at, and you outsource the rest and you focus on one thing. I think I'm surprised at a little why not a lot of rollups have done this historically, right? Like they've experienced periods of massive congestion where a lot of their dApps have churned, and they've kind of gone on to horizontal scaling instead, with yet a TBD solution on how to unify the experience. And a lot of users have churned from Ethereum because of that choice that they've made. Instead, when they could have just simply raised the gas limit of their blocks. Yeah, there is some limitation to that using the EVM, but they could have done it. And Base did it. So Base median gas fees during the liquidation spike 2 days ago was not as bad as Arbitrum's. But it's an interesting choice why they made that choice. It is revenue maximizing to do that, but still. And I think there is also a widespread understanding from popular rollup companies that it is impossible to do high throughput execution with Ethereum DA. It's kind of like why there's the alternative DA layers provided natively to like Arbitrum Orbit chains. I'm blanking on the name of what it's called.
Like, is it a specific chain or
like the Arbitrum DAX solution? They all have DAX solutions.
Like AnyTrust.
AnyTrust, right. So I think that AnyTrust is kind of like understanding that like, yeah, we can't scale high throughput chains with Ethereum DA. We have to use something, but preferably you'd rather use something that's like it's in the public. You can verify with the light client. It has billions and billions of economic security over. Okay, yeah, it's private.
Yeah, it's like you could run a really high performance chain, maybe like infinite TPS on AWS. But that's not what we're here for, basically. And I think Celestia wants to give you the ability to have that level of throughput, but still maintain trust minimization. And that's a much harder problem to solve. Like if it were the case that like data availability committees, like any trust were like sufficient for Web3, like, we could just like kind of, retire, hang up our boots and just be like, yeah, DA is like no longer a problem. But it very much is, because we want those security guarantees. We're here for trust minimization and verifiability. And I don't know, I'm just very glad that Eclipse also is prioritizing that in the roadmap. I saw you guys also in the blog post talk about how you want to progress as soon as possible to stage 1 and stage 2 roll up. And so I think this is a good transition to sort of like start to wrap up this conversation. Like what can people expect in the coming year or the next few months from Eclipse? Like where is Eclipse going to go, and what's next on the roadmap?
Yeah, and to the credit of the DAC companies, like they've worked a lot on verifiability, but I do think being in the public is actually very, very important, and allowing anyone to just like follow the chain is very, very important. Okay, what's next in the roadmap? Next 3 months, I would say it's all about the DApps and the ecosystem partners that are launching on Eclipse. So I think that's what you would hear the most from us about. So all the DApps that you love on Solana, net new DApps, DePIN, gaming, meme coins, you name it, NFTs. We have a full host of very interesting builders that are coming onto Eclipse. I think we'd be very excited to kind of showcase them over time on our Twitter page and also on live streams as well. And then in terms of the technical side, we have to become trustless over time. We have to become a type 1 rollup as soon as possible. So we're working hard on forced inclusions, on a trustless bridge, specifically a Celestian bridge. Make sure to have a verifier architecture, fraud proofs. Those things we'll be working very hard on. And then afterwards, we're going to turn our eye into, how can we further maximize the execution stack? So users never experience congestion. DApps get the value that they generate back to themselves. And there's generally a incentive aligned and high throughput execution layer.
That is music to my ears. And, as someone who's been following Eclipse for multiple years now, it's incredible that you guys are, live. And so this is the beginning of the journey. And I'm looking forward to seeing how the ecosystem grows, how the technology stack continues to evolve and get optimized and more trust minimized. There's just a lot to look forward to. So Terry, really, thank you so much for coming on, and congratulations again on the launch. Where can people, follow progress, or how should people like get involved in the ecosystem if they want to?
Yeah, definitely follow us on Twitter at EclipseFND. Follow each of our individual members. We're often posting about Eclipse and or being retweeted by the corporate account. Join us on our live stream and join us on our hackathon that's ongoing today.
Cool. And also a plug for Terry's talk at Modular Summit. I thought it was fantastic. Again, well, thank you, Terry. And we'll see you in the blob space.
Awesome. Thanks, Nick.
Cheers. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you, everyone.